दूसरा करेंगे
Welcome to Unfiltered, brought to you by Fighters First. Of course, FightersFirst.shop, where you can get all the latest clothing and apparel, combat sports clothing and apparel. I'm your host, Mike Ginn. This is our very first episode, so I'm super excited. I'm super pumped up. Of course, you remember our MMA conversation show where we kind of amped that up, evolved it a little bit, and here we go. We have Unfiltered. Joining me today, a guest in the combat sports world that is probably one of the most respected fighters to ever turn executive. He's been in this game his entire life. K1 boxing, Muay Thai, regular boxing, MMA, even professional wrestling. Ray Sefo has done it all. Of course, the head of PFL now. Ray, thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Of course, we'll get to the PFL playoffs. You're in the middle of it. You got all the gear on. PFL 9 coming up this Friday night. This episode will drop the day before it, so it'll be good time to get that hyped up. Of course, you got the featherweights and the light heavyweights going for the last 2 spots, or last 4 spots in the big $6 million giveaway coming up later in October, which also happens to feature Claressa Shields' second fight ever too. So it's going to be a big event going on for that. I know you're hyped up, and we will definitely talk about all that. But Ray, you have been doing this your entire life. New Zealand born, I believe, into a boxing family. Am I right? Your grandfather and how many family members were boxers when you were born?
Yeah, my father, my uncles, yeah, everybody boxed in the family. Cousins, everybody boxed.
How young did they start getting you into everything?
Well, my dad actually gave me my boxing gloves when I was 5 years old. And it was then that I started. I didn't even know he boxed up, at that point. But it was then that, it was then that I had started to move around with him, doing pads and teaching me a few things here and there. And then, a little after that, I found out that he had actually boxed himself. And and later on, or should I say earlier, I think it was after I won my first world title that some of my cousins were saying that my dad was actually one of the best boxers to come out of the islands. And so, that was surprising to me. And but I was, very thankful that he, and I guess one of the reasons why I'm so thankful also to him, to my dad, is because he never forced us to get into the combat world. He just, taught us to box and to defend ourselves. There was never
he let it be your own passion.
Right, exactly. He never said, no, this is what you need to do, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So it was
you
cool
and your brother, right? And your brother,
yes,
accomplished K1 MMA fighter himself.
Correct. Ronnie won 2 world titles through his career. I mean, my older brothers, I have 7 brothers and 2 sisters. And so my older brothers also boxed for a little bit, but they never really took it to the levels where Ronnie and I took it. And the rest is history.
I can see why your parents didn't want you all competing. That's a handful right there.
Right.
Having that many kids and then all competing, that'd be a lot. So luckily, I think it's always good. I have a daughter myself. It's always good when you let them kind of explore their own passions and decide who they want to be. I'm super competitive. I know you're super competitive, but sometimes you got to let them be what they want to be and how they want to be. So, and then just support them in that.
No, you're absolutely right. My son, who does kickboxing with me, Ramon does kickboxing with me, and he does jiu-jitsu with the class. and I just want him to teach just to defend himself. What I tell him is, I want you to learn martial arts so that you don't have to get into fights. And of course, my little girl does the same thing. But it's for my son though. It's really good to see that his focus and passion is something else, which is really cool because I don't want them to be fighters.
Yeah. I mean, you've given your whole life to it.
Right.
One of the things I kind of found interesting about your story, we're talking about early on, coming that journey, finding that love, and obviously it was kind of built into you from day one. But you started off in like Wing Chun, right? Like, isn't that one of the early things
Yes.
you did, like because of Bruce Lee and everything like that?
Yep. My dad had rented a movie, a Jackie Chan movie and a Bruce Lee movie, which was, I think, it was Fist of Fury and Drunken Master.
Totally
When I
opposite kinds
was
of movie, but yeah.
right, and I think I was 7 or so, and I was just hooked. Just fell in love, and I thought, wow, that's so cool to be able to throw kicks and punches and elbows and all this, and so then at 12 I started martial arts, and again, that was the beginning, was Wing Chun.
Yeah. How long did you stick with that before you switched over to like Muay Thai and stuff like that?
I did that for 6 years.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I moved over to Muay Thai was because every time I got into a street fight, and I'm not saying that everybody should get into street fights, it's just that sometimes, as kids, it happens, right? And so I'd always fought like a kickboxer. So I wanted to try something different. And so I went into a friend of mine who coached at the time as well, had a school. And when I went in there and, just fell in love with it.
Do you remember the first person you ever got into an official fight with?
Yes. His name was, his first name was Bronco. And I didn't understand why he challenged me to a fight. And the crazy thing is I never wanted to fight. I'd enjoyed the training. I loved the training. I loved the competition in training, but I never.
The sport of it, yeah.
Yeah. Fighting for me was, and I don't know, maybe because I just was just the fear of being embarrassed in front of millions of people, or at that time, was only a couple of thousands of people that would go to those events, as an amateur and whatnot. But I didn't really fully understand why I didn't want to compete. But when we went into one of our teammates was fighting, and he got diagnosed by a doctor there at the weigh-ins that he had a bad case of asthma, and so he wasn't allowed to fight. And his opponent is the one that challenged me to a fight. My mind was saying no. I guess my mind was more sensible. My heart was saying, "Well, F you, let's go." You know what I mean?
Your ego's on the line.
Right. And then, I think 2 or 3 months later, the fight happened.
Oh, okay. Did you win?
Yes. I dropped him in the second round, I think it was, or the first round, and won the fight. And the funny thing is, it was the first time I'd ever been booed in the crowd.
Because it was all his family and friends?
Right. And I think he was 5-2 in his record, or 7-2. That was my first fight ever. But the tide changed real fast once I dropped him. Everybody, and he outweighed me by, I want to say, 25 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And so once I dropped him, the whole crowd turned and they were cheering for me, which was nice.
So 6-time Muay Thai champion. I heard you in another interview one time. You said, especially when it came to your kickboxing career, obviously 6-time Muay Thai champion, multi-time Grand Prix finalist, and fighter and champion in K1. But you fought the best of the best. It kind of reminds me of that old, I think it was an 80s movie, maybe 90s, but that movie called Best of the Best, where they had like the karate tournaments and stuff like that.
Right.
And they'd go through, and literally you had to fight who's who, at any given time. And your career, I mean, it just reads off like everybody from, Ernesto Hoost, the classic fight, which I know everybody talks to you about, with Mark Hunt. Even later in your career, with Tyrone Spong and Crow Cop, which was one of his last. I don't know how many times the last fight Crow Cop's had. But,
well, that's the only, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's the only reason why I took that fight on 3 weeks' notice.
Because it was supposed to be his last?
Because it's supposed to be his last fight. And, I was in Brazil when because I was coaching Vitor Belfort at the time.
Yeah.
And I got that phone call when I was there. And I'm like, well, why did you guys wait till, 3 weeks ago to call me? And they said, well, we thought this. I said, come on now, don't play this game. But anyway, I decided to take the fight. And they keep saying that, this is his last fight. And I thought, well, we were matched up before and he pulled out. So this is probably the only opportunity to fight him before he retires. And so I took the fight, and then come to find out that same day after the fight that he announced that he was signing with K1 again or something or rather, which kind of, pissed me off. And so then I asked for a rematch, and of course that never happened.
Yeah. They don't want to give you a full camp now. Come on. I know this is always one of the hardest questions for you because you have so many relationships with these guys years later now. But if you had to pick out like one or two of your like toughest opponents you had to fight, who gave you the most trouble in kickboxing and Muay Thai?
Who gave me the most trouble? That's actually a really good question.
Thank you.
Who gave me the most trouble? I mean, for me, they were all freaking amazing. They were all great. And it was just one of those puzzles where you just got to figure out. The most technical, probably Ernesto Hus was one of the most technical fighters that I fought, and a legend of the sport. Peter Ertz, he was taking me sound, but he was just tough, Jerome Banner was another one. I thought he was good too, like tough and big and strong. So everybody, then we look at Mike Bernardo, who another, one of the best boxers in K1.
Like I said,
Mark
best
Hunt,
of the best.
Yeah, Mark Hunt was, that was a battle. They were all tough. It's just hard to pick out one particular fight. And I guess this is where, again, I've always said that I thank the good Lord every day that I've been blessed to do what I do and to share the ring with all these amazing fighters. It's a fighter's dream. You know what I mean? To be able to just say that, man, I really did face the best of the best.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me to see that list of people you fought, the Gary Goodriches, the Melvin Manoffs, the people that have later transitioned in MMA like you did late in your career. If MMA was as big now or big then as it was now, would you have transitioned sooner?
Yeah, 100%. If I had known that, if I could foresee the future and known that K1 would have gone the way they did, yeah. I probably would have signed with Pride already back then. But no regrets whatsoever. I've had an amazing career. I've had an amazing life. Again, I'm so thankful and so grateful and so humbled to be able to do what I do. And I mean, even now with PFL, I'm one of the lucky ones that was able to, hone in on something that I was blessed with and then kind of continued down on the executive side of things and being successful at it. And so, very grateful and very humble and very thankful that I'm where I am today.
Yeah, and I'm sure, especially back in those times, 80s, 90s, 2000s, like rough. The amount of craziness, especially overseas. I know you hear all the stories behind the scenes at Pride. You hear all the stories behind the scenes at K1 and stuff like that. So it wasn't just fighting. It was also the political game behind the scenes. It was also dealing with shady characters here and there that were coming and going.
Yep, 100%.
That size sounds like you have a story about something like that.
Oh yeah, the likes of, for example, when they called me to fight Bob Sapp in 5 days' notice, I had just landed in Austria, and the funny thing is, prior to maybe 4 months, because it took me 2 months to heal. And then I put myself through a camp because I was out of training for so long. So I put myself through a camp where, without knowing that I had a fight coming, I mean, that this fight was going to happen, I just wanted to get back in shape and be ready for the next fight. And of course, unbeknownst to me, it didn't realize it was going to happen so soon. But it was great because the phone call came, a week after I actually was done with that camp, and I was in Austria. Well, matter of fact, I just landed in Austria, and I got the phone call to fight Bob Sapp, and I'm like, well, when? Yeah, love to fight Bob. When is that? And they said, oh, on Saturday, and this was a Monday.
Wow.
So this, I mean, if you call that shady, yeah. I mean, they knew that they wanted me to fight Bob,
Didn't
but
work
they
out. Didn't
wanted.
work out well for Bob.
Well, no, because they didn't know that I had, that I had put myself through a fight camp. And the funny thing is, I run into Mike Bernardo in the business center, and he's like, Ray, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, they called me to fight Bob. And they said, well, do they know that you're in shape? Because you look in shape. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm ready to go. I mean, the fight, I ended up stopping Bob in the second round, at the beginning of the second round. And even that fight was so all over the place. Bob was trying to get disqualified and did all the things that he could do so he can get, so the fight would be disqualified. It was silly, but those are kind of like some of the little shady stuff that happens from time to time.
Bob's always been an interesting character. The few times I've seen him speak, he's kind of. I'll just leave it as very interesting. I don't want to put anybody down. Like, he's just very interesting. And then the times you see him fight, it's kind of a mix of, if he knocks you out, great, and if he doesn't, he's trying to find any way to kind of get out of there and go on to the next thing. It was always weird. He did some of the pro wrestling stuff as well, and he kind of like he was always an entertaining character, but you could tell there was something a little bit off about Bob.
But he's actually a really nice guy. Like, I like
that's
Bob,
what I hear. He got really
Um,
mad one time at us because back in the day, and I don't want to make this about us, man, about you, but Art of MMA back in the day, we've done a ton of interviews over the years, especially like written ones. But one of the video ones we did was with Tommy Toll, the animated character.
yes,
He
yes,
does
yes.
he does all the funny UFC skits and stuff, like he
Right,
used to for
Tommy
a long time.
Toho or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he did basically an entire cartoon interview with us, and he did it in character, obviously. And at one point, he's like, Bob Sapp, Bob Sapp, Bob Sapp, Bob, like who he wanted to fight or something like that. He's like, Bob Sapp, Bob Sapp, Bob Sapp. And Bob got so mad that he was featured in it. He like started like yelling at us and like trying to like go after us on social media and everything. And this is like, 6-7 years ago. And it was just hilarious. We were like, Bob, we had nothing to do with what he said. He's a cartoon. What are you mad at?
Right.
But he was so mad somebody put his name in a bad light. He didn't see Brock Lesnar coming after us. He was in the interview too.
But he puts himself in a lot of bad lights. I don't know why he would be mad at that.
Yeah, some people have like done. I mean, obviously, when we're younger, everybody does crazy things, and then you kind of grow up. And
right.
Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But this interview is about you, not Bob. So we'll steer back.
Right.
This is like all my podcasts. Everything gets sidetracked. Let's go back to it. So you have a great K1 career, and I'm trying to move along because I don't want to take up all your time today with your career spanning basically from the time you were born until now, so like 5 decades. But you do finally get into boxing. You're 5-1 as a boxer. You do MMA later in your career, 2-2 in MMA. Was that just kind of like to scratch an itch? I know you've always talked about how competitive you are and how you want to try everything. You never like say no. You just talked about a couple fights you took on short notice because you're like, well, let's see if I can do it. Is that why you, especially boxing, because I know you evolved in MMA, but the boxing, was that just something to see like how you would do?
There was, I wanted to.
Or is that just time and opportunity?
Well, a bit of both, really. As a matter of fact, I have 4 other fights that is actually not listed on there, but I think I'm 9 or 10 and 1 as a boxer. But I wanted to see, because I had sparred the likes of David Tour and Jimmy Thunder, who are not only friends but great boxers. And I have my own against them. So I wanted to do a little bit on when I had off time. And yeah, no, it was good. It was great.
So eventually, because the reason why I'm progressing through to MMA is obviously where you are now.
Right.
But in that process, and this is actually something, before I even get to MMA, you did pro wrestling too.
That's correct. Yes.
I have a hard time finding any record of this. I've heard you talk about it. I haven't actually seen it. We're pro wrestling fans here too, also. But so was this all in Japan?
Yes, it was. It was
so like New Japan or All Japan or something?
Yeah, Inoki is
Tony
organization.
Inoki.
Right.
Yeah, New Japan. Yeah.
And no, it was such a great experience. Like I didn't really think about it, but I mean, when we were going through training, I thought I'd broken my neck, and when one of the guys suplexed me, I was like, "What?" But yeah, no, it was an interesting. I mean, it was a great experience to be able to even experience that. I want to say I did 4 or 5 matches. There are a couple of single matches, and then did a couple of tag matches. But yeah, they were all. I mean, they were fun to do.
Did you ever get a chance to perform in the Tokyo Dome?
With wrestling?
Yeah.
No,
that was always their big shows, like the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah, no, not the Tokyo. Well, the smallest arena, which is right next door to the Tokyo Dome, but not the actual Tokyo Dome. Tokyo Dome, I did that with K1 when there was like 80,000 people there.
Yeah, that was crazy. Like I would see like crowds and that stuff, and I'm dating myself too because I'm not far from you, but like we'd have the VHS tapes and we'd be seeing like some of these Tokyo Dome crowds, and it's like 80, 90,000 people
right
crammed in. And then the greatest thing about that was it's like you could hear a pin drop.
Right.
Like when people are competing, they're super respectful. They're just taking everything in.
Yeah, they're amazing fans. The Japanese people are. I mean, the fans there are just truly amazing. But nothing but love for the Japanese people and the culture there. It's just beautiful.
So pro wrestling, you finally get into MMA a little bit later, but you finally do it. And you did have a fight outside of Strikeforce, but I definitely remember you kind of really getting going. You had a couple fights in Strikeforce. Obviously, later you had a fight with World Series of Fighting, your own promotion. What made you finally make that jump to say, all right, I want to do this before my career is over? And I do want to preface if your career is over, because I've never actually really heard you say.
Right, K1 was starting to slow down as well, and there were countless times where I would call, like, when am I fighting again? And of course, during that time, there was, obviously, I've been not knowing to us that what was happening, that it was slowly starting to, fold, and which gave me more opportunities to do other things and try other things, and then. Of course, my first MMA fight was in K1 Heroes, and then in Strikeforce and experienced that too. But yeah, I wanted to learn. I wanted to see what it was like to be in there because I was starting to work with MMA fighters as well, and so I wanted to learn. It's funny though because my first experience of being taken down and was I think one of my good friends, Jay Renan, who's a former world champion as well, and I couldn't believe how heavy he felt on top because he's a good wrestler, and it was that experience that allowed me to think about how to think about wrestling, and so I did that for a year. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. It's been experience, and then training jiu-jitsu as well.
At what point did you, in that whole process, did you kind of join like Extreme Couture and all that stuff? Like, what point did you start? Like during your, were you starting to train like MMA and stuff during your kickboxing career?
No, I the fun thing, my first MMA fight, I got given 2 weeks notice to fight that fight, and when I watched my opponent, he was a super medalist in judo, but when I watched him, I knew that the only way he would be able to take me down if we got into a clinch, because coming from a judo background, but he didn't shoot like a wrestler, so that's the reason why I took that fight. And I ended up stopping him in, I think it was I want to say it was early in the second round with a head kick. But I hadn't wrestled yet or really done any jiu-jitsu stuff until I joined Extreme Couture. The funny thing is, I ran into Jay, and Jay's like, "Hey, listen, we just opened the gym, come down." And it wasn't until 3 months later, I think, when I met Randy, is when I went down to the gym and joined the gym back then. So this is probably 14 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I got a couple funny stories about Randy too, but that's for another day. I've run into him in a couple of events. He's awesome. But
yeah, no, Randy's a great guy. Great guy.
Yeah. So you got 4 MMA fights. Valentin Overeem probably being the most famous name among them. Alistair's younger brother. Yeah.
Yep.
And then years later, one last fight against Dave Huckabee. Did you know when you took that fight with Dave that would be your last fight?
No, I didn't. I knew, hanging up the gloves was it was on its way. It was, because I started getting busy with WSOF and a few other things and coaching and whatnot. So I knew the end was near in terms of hanging my gloves up. And of course, I wanted to fight again, but it's just I ended up getting so busy with business and with coaching and things like that eventually I was like, okay, you know what, it's just that time. And now that being said, I'm in the gym 6 days a week, coaching and sparring and training and whatnot. And so just this old saying that once a fighter, always a fighter. And
well, I was gonna save that question for the end because, but we still got to talk about your entire executive career. But I was gonna save it for the end. But with things like Triller, Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, all these guys doing these exhibitions and stuff like that, De La Hoya getting ready to fight your boy Vitor, stuff like that.
I'd love to do something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say
boxing. I'd love to do a boxing fight.
How much is that competitive itch? I mean, boxing, kickboxing, you could do any of them nowadays. Just the nostalgia effect in these like exhibitions is back, and people want to see these people they've known their entire lives going at it again. It's crazy because I thought De La Hoya was way older than actually he is, because he's been gone. He's only like a couple years older than Vitor. I think he's like 47 and Vitor's like 45 or something like that, or 44, 46 or something. Right. But he's been retired for so long.
Right.
I was like, man, he's got to be like 55. 50, like, no, he's not. He's still like a couple years older than me. I mean, date myself. I'm 44. Like he's just a couple years older than me. And I'm just like, damn, he's not that old. Damn, Vitor's in trouble.
Well,
sorry, sorry, Vitor, but you're in trouble.
Yeah, Vitor is still quick, strong, but yeah, boxing's a different sport. And listen, Vitor's also a decent boxer in his own right. But
yeah, I mean, he's no Ben Askren. He's gonna come in and put on a good performance.
Right, exactly. It's funny because when that fight was set, I was like, oh my god, I knew Paul. I mean, I thought Paul was gonna win that fight. But I thought it would be later, like in probably. I knew he would win by knockout as well, but I thought it would probably be like 3-4 rounds. But it was.
I think every MMA fan and anybody that's at least a purist, it was all just whether we really believe Ben Askren could win or not, we were rooting for him.
Right.
Even if like he was never like the most popular like kid in class. Like everybody like had an opinion one way or another on Ben Askren, but when it came to fighting Jake Paul, he was all of a sudden the good guy. And everybody was like, "Oh," but we all knew he wasn't the most technical striker.
Right. Like you said, we were all rooting for him, but the reality was that he was fighting a guy that all he knew, in the combat world was boxing, and he had been training for a couple of years and had fought a couple of fights, and
And the thing is, people don't realize he's been training with top boxers and top fighters.
right. And I don't think Ben ever won a round in his MMA career through striking. And so that was already going to be, hard to do. But yeah, we were all rooting for him for sure.
I think Woodley's going to have a hard time with him too, because Woodley's training with people like Floyd Mayweather and stuff like that. But more than I do, there's differences between boxing and MMA striking, and the angles. And one of the things that, and I don't get too sidetracked with this, but one of the things that Jake Paul does real well is that 1-2 right up the middle to set up an overhand. And that's not people. MMA don't do that. Like when Luque came after Tyron Woodley, he wasn't coming after with, a 1-2, let me set up my overhand right. He was finding angles to get after him. And MMA is all about the angles. It's all about, changing levels. And there's not really too many levels to change in boxing. So your head's like right there. And I do think Woodley's always had good head movement, but it's going to be interesting, definitely, to see.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's strong. He's explosive. And of course, rooting for him as well. But again, it's kind of very similar scenario to what happened with Ben, is that you're fighting a guy that's getting more and more confident in boxing and his ability, and has been doing this for a little while, and so we'll see.
More than anybody, confidence, self-confidence, that can carry you sometimes more than talent.
100%.
If somebody who's talented isn't confident, they're going to get beat. Like, it doesn't matter. So you got to believe in yourself. But we started to kind of talk about it. Let's get back on track real quick. 2012, you start World Series of Fighting. How did that kind of come about? Because, longtime fighter, was it just an opportunity to partner up with some people and see if you could kind of start your own thing in what was quickly becoming one of the most popular sports in America or around the world?
Yeah, I've had, mainly because, again, like I said, I was coming to the end of my career, and knowing that K1 was pulling the plug. And then I had a couple of friends that fought in some organization overseas and didn't get paid. So, with those kind of things together, I just thought, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to start my own MMA career here, or MMA league here in the US. And so I called up a friend of mine and spoke to him, and he liked the idea. And then within a week, we had offices and just kind of went from there. And one of the things that I also said to the team at that point in time was that, that I wouldn't be part of anything unless, even though I was the one that started it all, the idea and putting it together. But I didn't want to start something without television, because we would be just a local show, and I didn't want to do that. And so the team kind of huddled together, and we were able to get a deal with NBC, and moved on from there. And now we're with ESPN and PFL.
So that whole thing, and there was, it wasn't without its controversy, obviously. But a couple questions I have you about World Series of Fighting. One, does it kind of make, because you're a fighter, but you've also been, a coach, and you're involved even now today with PFL. You're involved with the talent more than anything. Does it kind of make you proud when you see people like Justin Gaethje, Marlon Moraes, some of these Anthony Rumble Johnson, who got his career back on track mainly because of World Series of Fighting? Because Anthony Rumble Johnson, people forget, was like tumbling out of control. He couldn't make weight anywhere. You guys gave him a second chance. He had fights everywhere from, I want to say, middleweight all the way up to heavyweight with World Series of Fighting. And then, he kind of found his footing back again, got popular before he went back to the UFC. Does that kind of make you proud as somebody who helped develop some of these careers?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember clearly that conversation was with Anthony was that I wasn't looking to sign him anywhere other than the light heavyweight division. And it's funny because he said him and his team had been talking about it as well. So that conversation was easy to be had, and we came to an agreement, and he signed with us. But yeah, no, 100%. I mean, listen, I'm like a proud dad, when I see guys like Justin and Anthony and Marlon doing so well at the UFC, and going as far as the potential will take them. So yeah, no, 100%. I'm a proud dad when it comes to that.
So the biggest controversy that kind of came up with World Series of Fighting was obviously having Ali involved. Ali I always butcher his name.
Abdelaziz.
Yeah, yep. Abdelaziz. If I say it fast, like I start getting it, but then the moment I stop saying it, I butcher it.
Yeah.
But and the conflict of interest, it was a big deal kind of back then. You guys eventually mutually parted ways. My question really is, because I've heard it from both sides. I've heard it from fighters. Sergio Da Silva was on Art of MMA for a long time with us, and he knew people involved personally that were getting kind of seeing the pay scale difference. How Ali was trying to pay some of his fighters higher than some of the other people. But all this is kind of coming secondhand from somebody who was actually involved in all of that. Was there a direct conflict of interest, and was all the pay scale stuff real, or was that stuff that was just kind of spread in the press?
Well, I don't know I don't know anything about a pay structure, whatever, because everybody.
The story among the fighters was that he was bringing in people and paying them more than he was paying other people.
I don't think that's true, because the things that I saw, they all kind of very similar to what everybody else was making. And when it came to the conflict of interest, again, remember, I was new into the business and understanding how operations work and how the commissions look at certain things. So once I had been told, or once there was a lot of chat about what was happening, Ali and I went and sat down with Bob Bennett, and to make sure that this wasn't, that he wasn't doing anything that was not within the rules, if you will. And so, because there was a lot of, there was a few people that were matchmakers or leading in certain organizations and might not be as, on the local level. And so, yeah, once Bob told us there are certain things that that was a conflict of interest, Ali stepped down, and the rest is history. You know what I mean? And so, again, nobody. I mean, I didn't know that managing somebody and being. I mean, at that point, I had no clue until there was a lot of chatter about it, and then we did the right thing.
Of course, you're growing into this role like everybody else at this point. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like I said, also from the very beginning, that for us with WSOF and PFL, especially now with PFL as well, the way the structure is, I said, listen, this is going to take us 5 years to get it right. Because we're going to continue to learn from the different things that's going to, appear, and we'll continue to learn. And so, once we were told what was right and what was wrong, actions were made, and the rest is history.
Okay, that's a fair answer. So let's talk about the whole 5 years, because I saw an interview back in 2015 where at that point World Series of Fighting was growing, like it was just going boom, and we fast forward a couple years, and then all of a sudden it's not going boom anymore. You guys are transitioning over to PFL. From everything I kind of understand, World Series of Fighting kind of ended and PFL started, right? It wasn't a direct transition, was it? Is it the same organization technically?
I don't want to say it's the same organization, because you know, different partners.
Because Don Davis is heavily involved in this part.
Correct. And a massive thank you to Don that believed in the vision that I have, and funny though, because when Don and I were at dinner one time, this is when when they first came on board and took it over. And he had said he had been watching for about a year or so how things were looking and unfolding, and he was happy with what he saw with what I was doing. And so that was, that was the start of a great partnership, and the rest is history. You live and you learn, and you see things and you take action. Because once I saw there was some shady stuff going on behind the scenes, I actually took Bruce aside, Bruce Dyfick, may he rest in peace. He also was seeing certain things, and then he and I, kind of really took control of what was happening, and started to move forward, and started to weed out the people that wasn't helping or wasn't seeing the vision that I had and he had. You know what I mean? And our vision was to continue to grow the business and help fighters and give fighters an opportunity and a platform outside of the UFC and Bellator and other organizations, because and it goes back to the very beginning. I remember one of the reporters was asking a question. Well, Ray, why do you feel like there's a need for another promotion? And I said, well, all you got to do is look at my roster. I had Jake Shields, John Fitch, Anthony Johnson, Justin Gagey, Marlon Moraes. I mean, it was evident that our company needed to happen, and because all these guys were free agents.
Yeah, and I think I heard Don say on you guys were on the Tyson show, Hot Boxing, and Don was talking about like there was 1,800 fighters and 1,800 pro fighters, and they need a home. They need somewhere to fight.
Right. 100%.
With that transition, though, was there? So you partner up with Don Davis, who I guess is the majority partner in this, if I'm not mistaken, and you transition over to PFL to ESPN. Was there contention with NBC? Was that contract up, or was it just you guys decided to end that contract?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure the ending part of that part, because Don was in charge of that, and so I just actually no. We were coming to the end of the contract, and I think. And again, I don't want to speak out of line, but I'm pretty sure that NBC wanted to renew, but Don came up. Don was able to get a deal that suited us with ESPN, and I think it was just the right move at the time, for us to continue to move forward.
Was this before or after UFC signed with ESPN?
It was after.
Okay, so ESPN was already there. I mean, UFC was already there.
Actually, no. It was I think it was around during that same time, and then before our scenario was finalized, I think UFC the UFC already had announced that they also signed with ESPN at that time.
I mean, it's a great platform. It gives everybody room, and like you said, there's so many fighters, so many opportunities. You guys could be on a different night, but still draw a pretty good audience. I will say, as a fan, I kind of hate the way ESPN does the stream. Instead of doing like they do with UFC, they'll have like preliminaries, early preliminaries, and main card. With PFL, for whatever reason, they put part 1, part 2, and then it's not available right away. It's kind of confusing sometimes. So hopefully some of those kinks get worked out a little bit as far as a fan, because sometimes people miss stuff. One of the great things about ESPN Plus is if you miss it live, you can go back almost instantly and rewatch the whole event. And I love having that on-demand ability with any of the cards. We all have busy lives, so sometimes you happen to miss things live. It's great to be able to go and watch it. let's talk about PFL though. Let's talk about PFL before I get you out of here. A lot of stuff going on right now. But Don did ask a great question on that interview we just mentioned. He asked it to Tyson. I want to ask it to you, especially being that we're on the Fighters First Network. What does Fighters First mean to you?
Well, I mean, one is, is the way we look after them, the way that, and every fighter that I've spoken to since the PFL beginnings, if you will, they've loved every part of. Our staff are just truly amazing. They if anything the fighters needed or wanted, we're able to answer questions and do things for them as well. That being said, it goes hand in hand that you can't just ask some crazy stuff because you're not gonna you ask something silly and when you're gonna get a silly answer. You know what I mean? And but a lot of that is to do with making sure that they're active, they're busy, they're fighting, they're getting paid well, and that's all what fighters want is to be fighting regularly and to be making money so they can feed their families and to be well looked after while they're in the hands of the PFL.
Do you agree with Tyson where he said you have to light a fire under their ass?
Meaning?
Well, Tyson said like you have to get after them, you have to light a fire under them, you have to make them hungry. Like when he answered that question from Don, do you agree with that?
I yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, to keep them motivated and whatnot, yeah, definitely. And I think we as people sometimes need a little bit of kicking up in the backside just to make us realize, okay, you know what, this is what I'm meant to do, this is what I need to put in, this is where I'm going, that's the direction, and so on and so on. And so, yeah, 100%.
So, two questions I have right off the bat about PFL. One, you've gotten a really good job of bringing in celebrity endorsements, celebrity ownership, if you guys call it that. How much of that is them actually investing in the product versus them trying to be like almost like influencers and spokespeople? Are they like financially really invested?
Everybody that Don's brought to the table, yes, they are
The Wiz
all
Khalifa's, the
partners.
Marshawn Lynch's.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I was always curious about that, like whether it was just like almost like a paid endorsement. Like how much are they like really invested in the product? I know Wiz is a huge MMA fan, so I wasn't really surprised by him. But the Marshawn Lynch one kind of caught me off guard recently, and of course Tom Brady and players like that in past years. So always curious about that. And why no elbows?
Well, because it's a season and elbows takes a while to heal. Like guys get cut and guys are fighting every 7 to 8 weeks, if you will. And the cut, let's say it closes within a couple of weeks. It's still tender and it's a lot easier to also open up. And hence the reason why. And also, I mean, majority of the elbows of cuts that comes from elbows, it's I want to say every time it lands, and 99% of it,
Yeah. That's the best response I've heard. I've heard a bunch of other like fighter safety things, but I think realistically with your season, I think that makes the most sense. I actually kind of respect that response because that's real. Like the amount of medical suspensions and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to have a season if a guy's on the shelf.
100%.
Speaking of the season, and I'm trying to kind of rush through this last part because I know you got to go soon. Couple things I've really liked about PFL.
5 minutes is no problem. I mean, I can be late for.
All right. The smart cage, I think, is awesome. Don mentioned also the gambling connection. People can then start betting on how fast the fastest punch was. We see it on DraftKings already on some of their pool stuff that they do, like who's going to have the fastest punch of the night, who's going to have this and that, like as far as stats go. Was that in mind when you guys came up with the smart cage, or was it just a cool factor? Like this is something other people aren't doing. Kind of riding that whole sports science.
Don is a smart guy. He had already. I mean, obviously the whole team are very intelligent people, and they knew, part of that was is to have the audience participate in, and being interested in the kind of speed that punches would be thrown at or powers or the strength of a kick and whatnot. And then, of course, with the betting being involved in it as well, that kind of, I think, just organically flowed into it.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think especially there was a huge push, especially the last few years, of sports science, and like ESPN would do those sports science segments where like somebody like how fast is this basketball player really getting to the rim? How hard is somebody hitting something? Like how hard is this kick? And now you put that into the cage where you can measure it real time, and that's insane. It's definitely one of the things I like about PFL is the TV presentation. Like you guys look like you're built for TV. I'd be interested to see more live events when COVID kind of opens up and the pandemic passes and people can kind of really get back to being what we used to be. But that your presentation is just 100% built for TV, and I think it comes across great. But in that process, you've brought on some big time fighters. You've brought on Anthony Pettis, Roy McDonald, Fabricio Werdum, people that had names. Is it disappointing that some of them haven't performed to the level that they did in the past? Or is it exciting that your guys, your homegrown guys, kind of have stepped up and kind of taken that mantle and taken the torch away from them?
It's never disappointing because all these guys are training hard to get there, and of course you just never know what the outcome is going to be until that bell rings, the final bell rings, and I mean, listen, it just shows that we got some real fighters, and in the PFL, and that we have talent, and we're going to continue to sign new free agents. But the fight game just sometimes is not your night, and it wasn't for those guys. I mean, Rory, his first outing, he won, and so that was great.
And then the controversial decision with
right, exactly. And that, listen, at the end of the day, I mean, there's been some, and I'm going to say this on here because there's been so many decisions that commissions have done, also I say judges have done, that's been the wrong decision or the wrong judging, if you will. And I just wish that they would get some more training so that
go
these
watch
mistakes are not made.
Right, go watch Art of MMA. I do that rant like once every 4 or 5 weeks on MMA judging. Yeah.
Okay, right. So you understand exactly what I'm trying to say.
It's an issue that we can't find a solution for. Like some of these people are friends of friends, or they have no combat experience,
right?
And they're judging these fights, and they're still doing it somewhat on the old boxing scale. I kind of like the way one does it, to be honest with you. I don't necessarily agree with their scale, but you pick a fight, you pick a winner. Like you still have the rounds, you have the breaks, but you just pick a winner, and there's no split decisions. It's like who dominated the fight.
And I didn't know that.
I like the way one does it because and you obviously could do open scoring. That's another way to go about it, of course. And don't want to get sidetracked too much into MMA judging because that's a whole show on itself.
Right, exactly.
I'm sure you've seen plenty of that. But speaking of that, like you have Roy McDonald, Ray Cooper, the last 2019 season, this season, this guy just continues to improve, continues to get better and better, and you're developing new stars. Him, Capoloza, there's just so many guys that people might not have known before these tournaments, and now all of a sudden they're becoming household names. You obviously have the names like Kayla Harrison, who's just grown leaps and bounds since she stepped in your cage, and then you got new names like Claressa Shields. What do you expect out of Claressa? What's your plan for her? Because you obviously got to bring her along a little bit slowly, but she's a big name.
Yeah, she is. I think listen, there's a reason why she became a two-time Olympic champion, as well as a two-time boxing champion. It's because she has the mindset, the work ethic. All she has to do now is focus on her grappling and, her wrestling, obviously her jiu-jitsu as well. But for her at the moment, like I've told her manager and coaches is that listen, they all know that she's got to defend the takedown and keep her standing. Or if she does get taken down, she's got to scramble, get back to her feet. I mean, that's where she's going to be the best at it. And until time where she's more comfortable on the ground, then she can look to submit and whatnot. But for the meantime, her game is it's all about defending the takedowns and scrambling if she does get taken down, scrambling and get back to her feet. Because again, she's a two-time Olympic champion in boxing. So she's got good hands. She's got the work ethic to make it work. And so I think and like you said, it's about bringing her up slowly and getting her the right fights to get.
She's perfect with Jackson.
Right.
She has Holly Holm right there.
Right, exactly. And I mean, you couldn't ask for better training partners. We've seen her train with John Jones as well, and I mean, she's in the right place and around people that understands and knows the game really well.
And have been where she's been. Like I said, Holly has done what she
Right.
did. Real quick, couple things about this season: the Renan Ferriera Fabricio Werdum situation.
Right.
Obviously, Fabricio felt he tapped. Ref never stopped it. Renan got the KO. Later, they go back and overturn it to a no contest. How did you feel about that situation? And in your mind, because as a fan, I feel like Renan Ferriera got kind of screwed out of the playoffs because, Jamel Jones comes in, gets the knockout, gets his 6 points, and there's only 2 fights in a season. All of a sudden, Renan never had a chance to get back that extra fight that he lost.
Right.
How do you feel about that whole situation?
Well, unfortunately it happened, but and Renan's a great guy that he just put it down to experience and it's time to move on. And then he comes out and puts on an amazing performance by finishing his opponent early in the first round. But yeah, I was surprised that the commission overturned that decision so soon. But it is what it was, and you can only move forward from there.
I've always felt like the ref's decision should be final, whether you agree with it or not. If they want to run it back, they want to run it back. But I thought that was a tough decision for Renan because it was never really sure if he tapped. You can kind of see it, but you had to slow it down like super slow-mo to see it. So
yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't think me personally, listen, I got nothing but long respect for Werdum, but me personally, when you're tapping once on the shoulder, to me that's not a tap.
I thought he was blinded and looking for him, finding him. Like that's the way I perceived it. But you always go until the ref stops you, and if he let go, that was on him.
Right, exactly. And so the great thing about our sport is that there's no paperwork to say that they can't do a rematch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
now I know how you're going to start off the 2022 season. All right, let's finish up 21 season real quick. This episode's airing on Thursday, Friday night. You have the featherweights and the light heavyweights going. Promote that for me, and then tell people what they can expect later in October when you're giving away $6 million in prize money.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't beat that when you're fighting for the opportunity to get $1 million. And so yeah, this Friday headlining is Renan Lachlan versus Marvalit Kapolaev, and our co-main event is Chris Wade and Bubba Jenkins, who
By the way, I love Chris Wade's story this year. He's been on the bottom of your card like every episode, and he just keeps on winning. Like we have a lot of connections to Long Island MMA, especially through the late Sergio Da Silva and stuff like that. And just seeing Chris Wade come up is just an amazing story to us. Like we love it, so we're rooting for him.
Yeah, no, exactly. He was. He came back as a featherweight and has looked amazing. And so I think this was a blessing in disguise for him to kind of go down a weight class. And but he's just looked great since since going down to 45.
And then, of course, Antonio Carlos Jr. and all those guys at 205 going at it. And
Right.
then everything sets up for October. So what can people expect for that season finale?
Well, yeah, you know what? That's gonna be open to the public. So I believe the tickets are going on sale either now or real soon. So
Is it still going to be in Hollywood, Florida?
yes, yeah, we're definitely coming back here, and I think everybody's excited about the finale and seeing 6 fighters get crowned and also winning, $1 million each, which is, it's life-changing money for people, and so you know. I think it's going to be an amazing night as it always is. But this time we're definitely open to and hopefully this COVID thing passes over real soon, so that we can continue to have open shows to the public and have people come and enjoy the show.
You clearly changed up the format this year, and like you're not doing the 2 fights in one night. You're not, the season's been a little bit more compacted because of COVID. Is this going to be what you think the format going forward, or do you think you'll kind of go back to the other format like in 2019 and stuff next year and stuff like that?
Yeah, no. I mean, the format is a format, right? The only reason why we've made some changes a little here is because of COVID, and so just looking out for the safety of our fighters and making sure that everybody's is healthy to compete, and hopefully this whole thing is all said and done by next year, and everybody will be back to normal way of life, if you will, and also back to the old format where to get to the finals, you got to fight 2 fights in one night in the playoffs.
Well, Ray, I won't take up any more of your time, man. I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're busy. You got the playoffs going. You got everything else going. I would love to get you back on some time and talk some more about some of those shady dealings and some of those stories. If you can ever get behind some of those stories and let them know to the public, I would love to get you on for those. I feel like those could be an episode all into their own. Of course, PFL on ESPN Plus, ESPN2 this Friday night. And make sure you stay tuned for the championships in October 26th, right?
27th.
27th? Okay. So make sure you tune into that. Obviously, Claressa Shields also making her return to the cage as well. Ray, thank you very much. I'll let you get out of here. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Unfiltered.